Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. My name is Paul, the Canadian Snowman, here once again with the 100 Years War. I think this is episode 5 or 6, something like that. This is like the last episode on the playlist. Uh, I heard that there's supposed to be at least one more to come out, so maybe that'll be out hopefully within the next day or two. But if not, we'll definitely get back to it. So we're going to, I guess. It doesn't really mention Joan of Arc. So I mean, I guess the introduction was last episode, right? So I'm sure she'll play a big part in this. Obviously, the Battle of Formigny for 1450. And previously, Joan of Arc kind of kicked some butt. And I just think the English didn't have enough troops to kind of perform like a proper siege. And the French kind of exploited that. Joan of Arc showed up on the scene, and with some smarts, they just took them out. Pretty much handled their business and won that battle. You guys in the comments seeing a few replies saying that she was a peasant to start off. So she came up as a peasant, which is kind of fascinating, especially back in those days. You guys also kind of reminded me that back in those days, religion was like a really big thing. Like, people took that stuff extremely seriously and stuff like that. So obviously, if someone comes forth with visions and she's like very believable and just charismatic or whatnot, just comes off very believable, people are going to take notice and listen. And I guess over a long period of time, from word of mouth, people are going to know her and her stories, and just eventually it builds her up to where she's going to get noticed, from royalty and stuff like that. And that's kind of, I guess, how she got well known. But it's not really known, I guess, how she, I guess, knew like military tactics and all. I guess that's still kind of up in the air. Probably just kind of assumes that she kind of I don't know, like, she could have just like ran into like just growing up, could have been like talk to like war veterans just around, just telling her stories and tactics, just something simple like that. I mean, she kind of learned just like that. I don't know. It doesn't seem like many people do know, or she maybe when she did start up, join these wars or whatnot, she could have had like a sidekick, not a sidekick, uh, just experience, another general next to her or a captain or whatnot that knew their stuff, and she kind of like went with them and they helped her. I don't know. Anyways, I'm on a tangent here, but anyways, we're gonna get into this 100 Years War. I don't know what's going on. I mean, obviously, I do know what's going on. The French are kind of like, they're kind of starting to roll here, and I guess we're gonna see if the English will slow her down, the French down, and see what happens. So yeah, that's where we're kind of at. So yeah, I hope you guys are having a great night, great day. If you're watching this, if you're new here, definitely please hit that like and subscribe. And if you're not new here and haven't subscribed or whatever, do it now anyway, please. But anyways, yes, thank you. Exciting stuff on this channel, man. 3, 2, 1, bam.
The era of great English victories by their seemingly invincible longbow armies finally ended with the watershed victories of Charles VII at Orleans and Patay.
That's true. Like, the longbows weren't a factor at all, and like they were the biggest factor. Sorry, I got a little fly flying around. They were the biggest factor in the last victories. And I guess the siege wasn't a factor at all, even though basically the troops left the fortress or castle or whatever. But still, like, I guess there just was no tactics on the English side after that was done. So if the English don't get their longbow game going again, it's not looking good, because they're going to be outnumbered most likely.
In that year of 1429, the tide of the 100 Years' War finally turned. From that point forward, England's fortunes, both military and diplomatic, would start to collapse with remarkable speed. while the reinvigorated French under the Valois would continue to grow in strength. Welcome to the penultimate video in our series on the 100 Years' War, the death of Joan of Arc, the fall of Lancastrian Normandy, and the beginning of the end of
basically the death of Joan of Arc? What? Hold on.
The death of Joan of Arc.
Hold on a second. Did I get that right?
To the penultimate video in our series on the 100 Years' War, the death of Joan of Arc, the fall of Lancastrian Normandy, and the beginning of the end of the English invasion, culminating.
So Joan of Arc dies here? Did I hear that right? I hope not.
In 1450 at Formigny. The medieval era is fun, but if you want to have some sci-fi style fun, the sponsor of this video, Mech Arena, is just times as you want, no limits. The game has regular special events. 1 black carbon skin, 300 A coins, 50,000 credits, and get a head start before everyone else. This is going to be epic. Don't miss out. The momentous coronation of Charles VII at Reims in the summer of 1429 gave England's regent in France, the popular and capable John of Bedford, time to brace Paris itself for an assault by the new king's inspired forces. When it came in late August, once again with Joan of Arc leading the charge, Bedford was prepared, and after a few skirmishes and a brief siege, the French were repelled. The momentum of Orléans had run its course, and Charles ordered his army away for winter. By this point in the war, Joan was becoming politically troublesome for the restored Valois monarchy, despite her role in boosting French morale in the dark decade of the 1420s. After continuing campaigns on her own for a few months, she was captured at Compiègne by the Burgundians and then sold to the English in November.
Wow. Okay.
After one of the most notorious religious trials in world history, the Maid of Orléans was burned at the stake by English soldiers in Rouen, convicted as a heretic.
What?
At the time of her death in May 1431, Joan of Arc was only 19 years old. Charles VII made no attempt to save her. On the military front, Bedford managed.
What? That easy? That quick? Like, I'm like in disbelief right now. Like, are you serious? Like, when they said she was gonna die, I never really take it that seriously. Like, they're kidding, right? And then she dies like a minute later, and not even in battle or nothing, or old age or whatever. She gets captured and burned at stake at 19. That's insane. Like, wow, she came, Joan of Arc, made a big impression right there, rallying the country together, winning that big battle, rallying the country some more, and then bam. Troublesome for Charles. I guess, the French didn't could have tried more, I guess, to get her back, with wow, I guess, just because, you think that the generals did be able to, Joan of Arc, she was a somebody, so that, you just trade prisoners, where, just how, like, the kings and stuff, were captured by the English, and they kind of, like, traded off, to get the king back, whatever, the ransom or whatever it was. But they went straight to burn her to stake. I'm guessing a big part of that is she was a woman, so like the whole witch thing, look at her as a witch, and they burned her. Maybe they didn't like the fact they got beat by a woman. That could have been a possibility. Maybe they asked for ransom, and Charles like, no, she's giving me issues. All the people like her more. I don't like it, so forget about her. I got the victory I needed. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's a lot of speculation. Maybe you got like. Once again, let me know in the comments, if I guess, you can't really know exactly. I mean, they don't really tell us much here. Just a lot of different ideas, right? Anyways, wow. Joan of Arc is gone.
To stabilize the situation by retaking a few castles, and this gave Bedford an opportunity to emulate Charles's propaganda coup of 2 years prior. On December 16th of that year, Henry VI of England was crowned Henry II of France as well. However, all things taken into account though, the war was not going well for the English, who no longer had adequate finances or manpower to defend its 350-mile-long line of contact in France,
Wow.
fund the modern war with gunpowder siege weapons, or maintain its many garrisons. It was only through Bedford's capability and love of him among the Anglo-French that the lands were maintained. Despite minor English success in retaking some rebellious Norman castles in 1434, the revolt continued to bleed the occupiers of much-needed resources, and their situation continued to deteriorate. Even more unfortunately for the English, their most important ally could see the way the winds were blowing. The dual monarchy suffered 2 body blows in quick succession during 1435. On September 14th, the ailing Duke of Bedford finally passed away at Rouen and was replaced by Richard of York. Worse still was the Treaty of Arras, signed on September 20th between King Charles VII and Philippe of Burgundy. This finally reconciled the feuding French factions in a settlement which granted the Duchy of Burgundy even more territory in return for Philippe's formal recognition of Charles VII as the French king.
Wow.
This political sea change had an immediate effect, as unrest began to occur all over the English lands in France. Moreover, the armies of Charles VII,
Man, like it's just like it's just falling apart for the English right now, man. It's like, Charles got his, ally Philip in here and losing land, and looks like they're going to lose more land because they don't have the money really to keep this area occupied and keep people happy. And I don't know. Wow, they're going to end up losing all this, aren't they?
managed to capture the coastal towns of Dieppe and Harfleur, crucial for ferrying reinforcements and supplies across the Channel. Peace negotiations in 1439 failed, but over the next few years, England's position on the continent only got worse. Pontoise, the last English foothold in the French crownlands, fell in 1441, and the year after, Gascony was attacked for the first time in decades. Because a group favouring peace with France at any cost, led by the Duke of Suffolk, had great influence with the king in England, the latter led an embassy to Tours in early 1444 for a conference. France's delegates were unwilling to make any kind of compromise. The deal was in reality a desperate one for Suffolk. In return for an extendable 2-year truce, Henry VI would be betrothed to the niece of Charles VII, Margaret of Anjou, and England would cede men to France. Though the peace came as a great relief to English civilian settlers in northern France, who were on the receiving end of increasing French attacks, it was generally received with fury in England, and served as one of the factors which made the Wars of the Roses inevitable a decade or so later.
Oh, okay.
As Henry's realm started falling apart, Charles made good use of the truce to embark on a series.
I guess that makes sense. A lot of uproar. These. Yeah, I definitely wish I would have done this series first, but I guess War of the Roses was done before this series, which seems kind of odd. But anyways, yeah, things obviously fall into place here, and definitely interesting.
Started falling apart, Charles made good use of the truce to embark on a series of military and monetary reforms which would forever change the feudal France which he had fought so hard to inherit. The taille, a direct land tax which had only been occasional until this point, became permanent and funded the king's changes. Feudal French armies had been hired by contract for centuries and usually went home at the end of the year. Starting in 1444, however, only the poorer quality units were discharged, while the better contingents were retained as the core of a new standing army.
Interesting. Okay.
On January.
So yeah, it's kind of like things are getting more modern. It's not just okay. Well, we go into war, so everyone just kind of get together. It's like we'll always have an army, like ready to go for anything. So, okay, I guess this is kind of where it starts,
5th, 1445, the French royal government officially announced the formation of Compagnie d'Ordonnance, regular units of troops supplemented by bringing the highest quality bands of routiers and écorcheurs, many of whom were dismissed mercenaries, to the king's service. To ensure their continued loyalty, discipline, and relatively high moral standards, these new professional soldiers were paid monthly with the new revenues. Recruitment of former freelance soldiers cut down the amount of banditry in the kingdom, while also making use of an untapped reserve of experienced manpower.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. They got like, if there's like an uproar in the country or something, they can send troops very, quickly, and they're experienced and they know what they're doing, as opposed to, I guess, it would take time to get, some troops together to fight some bandits or whatnot. So cool, cool, cool.
Other less reputable écorcheurs were viewed as an impediment to peace, little better than the outlaws which had tormented France for decades. Another vital part of Charles' modernization of the French army was his integration of modern gunpowder artillery, which emerged in European armies during the early 15th century. Particularly revolutionary was the development of so-called crumbled gunpowder, which didn't disintegrate into its separate components when moved, and was therefore far more reliable and far more effective. Other technological advances, including multiple powder chambers on breech-loading cannons, meant that newer cannons could have a surprisingly high rate of fire. Enter the brothers Jean and Gaspard Bureau, sons of a merchant in the service of Charles VII. After being appointed to the task, the duo regularized the haphazard and sporadic variety of cannons currently used by inexperienced French forces. Proper usage for each type of gun was specified, and a greater level of training and professionalism was instilled into a previously relatively neglected arm of the military. In addition, the brothers used France's new fiscal strength to purchase standardized, higher quality bronze gun barrels. Larger bombards were retained for heavier siege duties, such as battering down castle walls, while smaller caliber guns, such as the culverin, would be used against infantry targets. In Normandy, and the formerly relinquished county.
That's kind of cool how they kind of stopped there to kind of give us a little like input on like just how the advancement of gunpowder and cannons and stuff like that. So that's definitely really neat.
Of men, it was becoming clear that the Duke of York and his military forces in France weren't going to dance with the conciliatory tune of Henry the.
So obviously they probably had to show us that for some reason, because I mean they could just just told us that just for the fact that things are changing, or that could just what they showed us, the new cannons and all that, might make a giant impact in this coming up battle, right? I mean,
military forces in France weren't going to dance with the conciliatory tune of Henry VI's advisors. To them, it was inevitable that more territory would fall if the French weren't resisted now, and so the garrisons of men refused to leave their fortresses, such as the capital at Le Mans. This provoked threats of renewed warfare with France in late 1447, but the garrisons did hesitantly withdraw from men in March 1448, further diminishing the English position in now exposed Normandy. Soon after, York was sent to govern Ireland as a means of getting him out of the way, and was replaced in France by his great rival Edmund Beaufort, Duke of Somerset. The tension in Normandy finally came to a climax when the captain of Verneuil, François de Surienne, attacked a Breton fortress at Fougères with Suffolk's backing in March 1449. The town was badly sacked, and its fall prompted the then neutral Duke of Brittany, François I, to ask Charles VII for help. Somerset refused to apologize for his subordinate's act, and the French retaliated by quickly seizing castles at Pont-de-l'Arche, Géberat, and Conches by late May. France offered to exchange Fougères for these towns, but was refused. This made the resumption of war inevitable, and it was finally declared at the end of July.
I mean, I think this would have happened anyway. Just, that kind of like sped things up, the whole, doing stuff without permission kind of thing there. Whatever his name is. So I think this would have happened anyway. We're just kind of speeding the process up.
War inevitable, and it was finally declared at the end of July. Charles VII crossed the Loire in August and took personal command of the southernmost of 4 armies, which now simultaneously invaded the weakened English lands in Normandy. It was a total walkover. On the 8th, French forces took Pont-Audemer, and Somerset's other castles began to fall with alarming frequency, their garrisons having been consistently reduced over the decades. A few weeks later, on the 26th, the inhabitants of Mantes rose up against the English, seized control of a gate, and forced the garrison to surrender to Charles' troops. In September, Breton forces completed their conquest of the Cotentin Peninsula south of the Grand Vai and handed it over to French royal officials, while at the same time the Duke of Alençon took back the city which bore his name, which had been beyond the man's control for decades. On October 16th, the king's personal force, led by Dunois, besieged the glorious Anglo-Norman capital at Rouen. Knowing no relief was coming, Somerset surrendered the city in less than a week and was allowed to march out with his garrison to English-held Caen. So driven were the French to complete the reconquest that their operations continued into winter, and they eventually managed to recapture the crucial channel ports at Harfleur and Honfleur. By the time Charles's offensive halted, England only retained a small area of central western Normandy around Caen and Bayeux, in addition to the Cotentin Peninsula's northern segment, with Cherbourg as its most important city.
Man, the French, man, they're just pushing them out, man. They just got the numbers, and like Somerset, man, like what are you doing? Like, I guess he just ain't got the men, he just like he can't do nothing, he's just trying to hold them off as long as possible, pretty much.
In England, 2 of the most powerful figures in the kingdom, Queen Margaret and Suffolk, raised a formidable army of 4,500 men and the ships with which to transport them to Normandy. Sir Thomas Kyriel was put in command of the force. He was a veteran of the war in France and a Knight of the Garter who came from a family of middle-ranking knights, which for centuries had served the kings of England as sheriffs and in other similar roles. However, the expedition was delayed because of a lack of ships and the onset of winter. Worse still, when the army learned that their second installment of pay was to be postponed, they mutinied and killed one of the king's officials. Suffolk was widely regarded as the cause of the unrest through maladministration, and when he attempted to flee across the Channel to escape his enemies, he was assassinated in May of 1450.
Dang.
Despite a false start to the campaign, Kyriel and his soldiers sailed from Portsmouth as soon as the weather in 1450 permitted, landing at Cherbourg on March 15th. These reinforcements instantly boosted the faltering morale of the English in Normandy, and led to Kyriel's army receiving a further 1,800 reinforcements from the large nearby garrisons. France's garrison at Valognes realized that it was in danger and requested support from the south, but Kyriel pounced too quickly, besieging the castle for 3 weeks before it finally surrendered on April 10th. The squire in charge of the fortification, Abel Rouault, was permitted to depart with his garrison, supplies, horses and possessions in return for the capitulation.
Okay.
After learning of the new English invasion,
I guess Thomas is like, man, Thomas had to take care of it quickly before reinforcements came. So he's pretty much like, hey, just you can just give us the place, man. You take whatever you want, just give us the place. And the guy's probably like, okay, fine, good deal. Anyways.
Charles VII sent some of his best units and most capable lieutenants to inform and reinforce his commander in the area, Jean de Clermont. Having missed the opportunity to save Valognes, he established himself at Carentan on the main road that Kyriel would most likely use to move south. There, Clermont sent word to the Breton Constable of France, Arthur de Richemont, asking him to move his forces to Saint-Lô in case Kyriel marched that way. Meanwhile, The English moved slowly south, absorbing manpower, artillery and other siege weapons along the way. French scouts informed their commander that rather than passing by his location, Kirill and the English army were instead executing a potentially dangerous but incredibly well-executed march through the low-lying tidal marshlands near the Grand Bay, which they accomplished on April 14th with only minor resistance. Local farmers and other peasants were supplemented by a company of men-at-arms, but were easily brushed aside. Matthew Goff, one of the English captains, supposedly shouted at them, "Mad dogs, we cross despite you." After successfully getting past the harsh terrain, Kirill's army set up camp for the night at a village known as Formigny, while Goff was sent ahead to Bayeux in order to get reinforcements. Clermont moved to close the distance with the English at dawn on the 15th, and sent another message to de Richemont asking to be reinforced. After receiving the call for aid, he too set out for Formigny early on the 15th, but wouldn't reach the field before the fighting began. At the English position, Kirill's 6,000 troops spent the morning hours constructing a line of field entrenchments made up of ditches, potholes, earth.
It's gonna be interesting because there's like a lot of different like names kind of surrounding this area right now. So I'm definitely very interested to see how this plays out.
Constructing a line of field entrenchments made up of ditches, potholes, earthen palisades, and sharpened stakes to block the main eastward road. Accompanying this was a smaller series of fortifications to the east of Formigny, where they had made the village a makeshift fortress. As midday approached, English outriders returned from the west and informed Sir Kirill that a French army was approaching. In a hurry, the English knight had Goff recalled from Bayeux. Realizing he was about to be engaged, Kirill drew up his archer-heavy forces in battle array. His own 4,500 were placed on the right side of the line, anchored on the village of Formigny, while Goff led about 1,500 troops on the left near the Val stream. Clermont's 3,000-strong army of men-at-arms, mounted crossbowmen, and some artillerists began to enter the area shortly after noon, led by an elite Scottish vanguard company. When his forces approached the Val, they wisely halted about 600 meters away from their enemy, well out of longbow range. At a safe distance, the French forces formed up west of a bridge between them and the English, and for 3 hours Clermont's men remained where they were, while the general conferred with his advisors.
Cause like, is the French gonna like pull some trickery here, or are they gonna do what they used to do and just use manpower and just try and just use brute force, try to push them? So I wonder if the longbows will come into play here, because they're pretty deadly.
And remained where they were, while the general conferred with his advisors. The older captains cautioned restraint, while their younger counterparts urged an immediate attack before the English defences grew any stronger. Clermont, who would later be known as the Scourge of the English, opened the battle by sending forward 2 light culverins protected by a few hundred crossbowmen and men-at-arms. When the cannons opened fire, stationary English troops suffered heavy casualties from the unexpected artillery fire. Matthew Goff reacted first, sending 500 archers across the bridge to attack.
Yeah, the new cannons are doing pretty well, yeah?
Matthew Goff reacted first, sending 500 archers across the bridge to attack the small artillery position. They drove away the French gunners, captured the culverins, and killed those protecting them.
Oh, wow.
Panicked by the setback, Clermont ordered a group of local peasants to scour the countryside south of the battlefield in order to find de Richemont. He needed reinforcements as soon as possible.
Okay.
At the same time, the French commander sent a larger unit of men-at-arms under Pierre de Breze to reinforce their beleaguered comrades and engage the enemy troops. Though this fierce melee started well for the French under Clermont, Kirill sent more reinforcements to bolster Goth's soldiers, and it began to tilt in favour of the numerically superior English. Official reports to the French king, written only days after the battle, later states that if Kyril's army had launched a full-scale attack at this point, Clermont would have been defeated. That attack never came. As the clash went on in the center, a small army of around 1,000 men emerged onto the plateau south of the battlefield. The English were jubilant, celebrating that reinforcements had arrived to finish the French off from the flank. However, as this third force got closer, the sight of French and Breton banners made both sides realize what was happening. Arthur de Richemont's army had arrived, and Kyril was now the one in danger of being hit from the rear.
Wow. Man, like, English, I guess, could have, like, went ahead and, like, used their whole force and kind of won the battle, right? But they kind of set back, and now, things have turned, and the French, man, getting in from behind, this is insane.
De Richemont rode quickly with his advance guard to confer with Clermont, while the main Breton force remained on the English side of the Val. This was tactically problematic for Kyril's army, but it is likely that his numbers still considerably outstripped those of either French commander. In response, Sir Kyril had Gough's smaller contingent on the left start to redeploy, pivoting to face de Richemont's army to the south. However, the elite Breton advance guard used the opportunity to fight their way across the bridge, slaying 60 of their English enemy whilst doing so, and disrupting Gough's redeployment effort. With disarray now the order of the day amongst his enemy's troops, the Breton constable returned to his main army and advanced northeast towards the English rear, while at the same time
I was going to say, like, what's this guy doing back here?
Clermont assaulted their front. Also at the same time, Pierre de Brezé had mounted a few hundred men and rode around the field, seizing control of the eastern fortifications and preventing any substantial retreat. Kyril did his best to rally the now disorganized and demoralized English in the village, but Brezé charged them from behind, while both main armies attacked from different angles.
Dang.
To make this worse, the town peasants rose up and joined in the developing slaughter. The main English army was totally destroyed.
I'm guessing that they're taking no no survive. They're taking no one, like, surrender is not an option. They're just gonna slaughter them, just to kind of like maybe like payback from the English kind of slaughtering them a couple episodes ago. You know what I'm saying? So wow, everyone's fixing to get destroyed here. Damn.
Slaughter. The main English army was totally destroyed. Only Gough and Robert Vere survived to lead their surviving soldiers back to Bayeux and Caen respectively. One group of 500 longbowmen withdrew to a garden next to the Val and were on their knees begging for mercy. Nevertheless, Clermont's troops slew them anyway. The English commander Sir Thomas Kyril was taken prisoner, along with about 1,200 others, while around 3,800 of the knight's men perished at Formigny. This defeat finally broke the back of England's military hopes in Normandy. Most garrisons had contributed forces to Kyril's army, and his defeat now denuded them of defenders. Just over 2 months after the triumph of France's armies at Formigny, it had also seized Vire, Avranches and Bayeux on May 16th. In June, Caen was besieged and taken a few weeks later. Charles VII rode north and ceremonially entered the city on June 6th. With only little resistance, the Cotentin Peninsula city of Cherbourg finally went down on August 22nd, 1450. All of Normandy was now under French control for the first time in almost 3 decades. It wasn't over yet, however, as Gascony still remained in English hands. The last episode of our series on the 100 Years' War is coming, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see the next video in the series. Please consider liking, commenting and...
So wow, they took it all back, all of it. I mean, there's only, as far as like the north goes of France, you know, they still have on the west coast down there, still pretty good portion for the English. But man, they just developed, just like engulfed them, and just getting them from behind there, like they were just surrounded basically, and there was no retreat. There's nowhere to go. Like there was no like plan, because how do you plan? Like you can't retreat. Do a strategic retreat when your the fort back there is being overcome by the enemies. So wow, they just got slaughtered, and I don't know. They slaughtered the crossbowmen after they're on their knees begging for forgiveness. I don't know if that they just did that for the hell of it, or are they as payback for their own countrymen getting slaughtered, many years earlier. Because it didn't seem very tactical. I mean, if everyone's surrendering, I mean, you don't have to. I don't know, maybe they thought maybe that some backup for the English would show up. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't like each other. I don't know. But they got slaughtered, and wow, this war started off with the English, basically kicking butt, and now, yeah, it's the French kicking butt here. Joan of Arc kind of got the ball rolling, and when she died, the king or whatnot, and the rest of them just kept on pushing, and then that was it. So I'm not sure exactly what to expect. We got one more episode left, which is not released yet. I don't know when it's going to release. I'm sure you guys will let me know when it does get released, and we will finish this series up. But until then, appreciate you guys watching, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, awesome series, 100 years. I knew it was between the French and the English. I didn't know exactly how it would play out and whatnot. Definitely crazy stuff. Like, I guess this is the whole. This kind of what started like the whole like English French rivalry kind of thing. This 100 Years War deal. And then obviously this goes into the War of the Roses, but obviously this series ain't done yet, so no point even talking about that. But anyways, guys, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Catch you guys in future videos. I am out of here, and hopefully we get to see this one sooner rather than later, the finale. But anyways, peace. I appreciate you guys watching.